Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back. Of course, I've got to talk to you about this last weekend's box office. It was disappointing as expected, but I think Hollywood's starting to realize that they really don't have hold over the public anymore. Nobody's really interested in what they have to offer. It doesn't matter who the author is or what the franchise happens to be. In fact, I think they had a big surprise into what they actually thought would be number one this weekend. Many of us are going to report this over the course of the next few days, and a lot of people are going to find that Now You See Me is going to somehow be leading a weekend it had no business doing so. So, let's get started. Here we go. Of course, I say now you bore me. And when you take a look at it, it is kind of a boring thing at this point. They've taken something that was interesting. It had a lot of interesting actors and interesting roles playing interesting parts and kind of boiled it down to something that's a little less intriguing for everyone. It only opened in 3,400 theaters. It only opened this weekend. And at 21.3 million, it managed to lead at a time when there were other things out there they were expecting to do well, like The Running Man. They thought that this regurge of a terrible former horror story that used to be a wonderful Arnold Schwarzenegger film would somehow take over and dominate, but it didn't. It finished out at $17 million this weekend in only 3,500 theaters. When you take a look at the per theater earnings, those numbers are down. And even WDW Pro out there was talking about the fact that this was overall very disappointing. But when you look at the trades, I think they're quite terrified. From Deadline, Lionsgate, Now You See Me 3 with 21 million opening makes Running Man disappear from number one Sunday AM box office. Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, 21's not a lot of money either. None of these are big numbers for an opening for a major motion picture. And this is one of those weekends which are kind of coveted, especially with the male audience. The male audience went to go see this Lionsgate film rather than going to see an action movie that should have had them running for the theaters and experiencing something that they would have had some tangential memory to. But none of that happened. If you take a look at Anthony's references here, you kind of understand why. So with the AM refresh, there's a plenty surprise out there for Lionsgate's number one win with the threequel, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, at 21 million, global take at 21 million, with global take at 75 million. That's a lot. 54 million in offshore. China is contributing 19.2 million, which means Hollywood doesn't get very much of that. And we always told you that this movie would make magic abroad. And I'm not sure I heard any of that from any of them, but perhaps it was something I was ignoring. But I often ignore the trades these days because they're seldom accurate. And while Glenn Powell was certainly the star that everybody wanted you to focus on, perhaps they forgot that there had been other films that were successful previously when it comes to, well, big opening weekends. Stellarly, they recognized that there was clearly more goodwill out there for this IP than for the rival Arnold Schwarzenegger sci-fi 1980s pop culture film that is clear as Paramount's Glenn Powell starring Edgar Wright directed Running Man falls behind on its 20 million plus tracking to 17 million. I think it was more than that. I think people are just sick and tired of the writer of this particular thing, and that Edgar Wright really doesn't have his finger on the pulse of the male audience anymore, no matter what anybody says. It also deviated so entirely from the Arnold Schwarzenegger version of this film that it seemed almost unrecognizable to some audiences and perhaps even uninteresting, because everything that's turned into modern garbage now is widely rejected by modern male audience, which they don't seem to understand anymore. And somehow, some rival distributors refuse to fault Paramount on the release date of Running Man. This mid-November release date is a highly coveted James Bond date. It's a great place to launch any movie that's aimed at men. At least there's the Thanksgiving stretch, which can give Running Man a bit of a path, which I don't agree at all. In fact, I don't think our friend Mr. H is actually going to agree with that, at least not in his assessment, and I'm not sure anybody else will either. This movie is basically shot its wad, and it probably won't gain any more traction going forward, and I don't think there's an opportunity for growth here. I think we've pretty much seen what the box office has to offer going into Thanksgiving, and nobody's very enthused. From Variety, Box Office Now You See Me 3 captures first place with 21.3 million. Running Man stumbles with 17 million, and I'm going to tell you that's about the best way to describe it, because I don't see how you could say 17 million stumbling out of the gate is worth anybody's time. Not that I'm all about what films perform in their opening box office, but I'll tell you, if there was any excitement, it would have shown up at the ticket lanes. And look, I'm not the only one. There are many other analysts out there right now, including Jeff Beck, who says it doesn't have enough traction to survive the coming holiday season. And you know what? He's right. Despite the audience being 63% male, and the disparity of the female audience going to see Now You See Me at 54%, 65% of the total audience for Now You See Me was over the age of 25. So perhaps reaching back in the past for a Schwarzenegger film is not always the automatic winner they assume. Not to mention the fact that for the second consecutive weekend, Schwarzenegger films or references to Schwarzenegger films didn't perform very well because Predator Badlands at $105 million had a very poor opening last weekend. In fact, it just had a 68% fall off weekend to weekend, showing that maybe, just maybe, going back in the past isn't the best solution for the future. And looking at what Hollywood Reporter thinks, they don't think that Running Man is going to get past choking on a mere $28 million. And you know what? I agree. At least nobody's blaming this on Paramount's acquisition by Skydance, because I'm not sure they would have changed plans either way had they had any inkling of the idea what a failure this was going to be. I'm also not completely convinced that Now You See Me 3 is going to be all that high and mighty at the end of its theatrical run, but at least it'll be something that Lionsgate can point at and say, hey, we had a win this year. And let me just be very clear on what I think of tracking. I think it's lousy. I think they do a terrible job. And I think they don't have any more idea what a film is going to perform than mostly you and I do. Why? Because I think they don't actually have any kind of connection with the audience anymore. And I don't think they take the time to go out and talk to people about what it is they might be looking forward to. Heading into the weekend, Now You See Me 3 was tracking to debut at 19 million domestically, while Running Man was tracking to top the chart at 24 or 25 million, to be fair. Paramount was more cautious in suggesting 20 million, but by Saturday morning, the studio lowered its estimate to 17 million or 19 million based on the Friday's gross. 6.4 million from 3,534 cinemas. Yeah, I'd be readjusting downward as quickly as possible. That range was too bullish, however. On Sunday, Paramount reported the film opening to 17 million, even though rival studios show it coming in closer to 16 million. Monday actuals will determine who is right. The news was even worse overseas, where Running Man limped to an estimated 11.2 million from its first 58 markets, including paid previews. And that's a big problem. Directed by Edgar Wright, everybody expected this thing to do even better. And with the future movie star, at least assumed movie star, in Glenn Powell, this Pick marks the actor's first box office miss since he rose to fame after starring in a string of hits, including Twisters, which I still think was an overblown movie. Yet, according to the notes, audience reaction can't be blamed in this case since Running Man exit scores mirror Now You See Me 3, which has somewhat better reviews. One big difference between the two films is the gender breakdown. Running Man is skewing heavy male, 64%, meaning that it has to compete with hit holdover Predator Badlands, which I disagree with that characterization. But Wright's movie is the second film adaptation of Stephen King's 1982 dystopian novel after the 1987 film of the same name starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, which, let's just be honest, was a much better film adaptation and probably with a better ending, since Stephen King can't end anything. Of course, the weekend worked out as we probably expected, with Now You See Me 3 in number one place as far as the box office goes, followed by Running Man, Predator Badlands, Regretting You, and Black Phone 2. None of these films performed very well. In fact, once you get past Predator Badlands, you ended up with Regretting You and everything just falling completely off the table. Overall, I would say that the box office is thoroughly doomed throughout the rest of the holiday season, and I don't anticipate anything opening over $100 million, including, and this might get me in trouble, Zootopia 2, which comes out here pretty soon. I think there are a lot of overblown expectations for that particular film, including its earning well over $1 billion, but I guess we'll find out if I'm correct or not. Outside of that, the only thing that may perform better going forward could be Avatar Fire and Ash, which is just a few weeks down the road. It also won't have very much time to perform very well because it'll be wrapping up the year and headed into its biggest earning period at the beginning of 2026. So if it performs to over $1 billion, what year do you think will get credit? Aside from it all, this has been one of the most disappointing years in box office we've had in a very long time. This has no chance of comparing with 2018 and 2019, which is where we were supposed to be headed again. Boy, did we not make it. And with the overall earnings of this last weekend's box office, I will repeat the same concern I've had for the last 3 weekends. Where are the weekends of $100 million or more for box office? Long in the past, I suspect, but that is incredibly detrimental for theaters going forward. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, because I don't think $74 million is going to do it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. As always, if you saw a film you enjoyed, let me know what it was and why down in the comments as well. And as always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! For real. But maybe not at any of these movies.